You were always sensitive, my father laughed, and my brother mocked me at dinner. That night I walked out, then find 15 missed calls. I'm Ethan, I am 28 years old. And for the majority of my life, I've been a supporting figure in my own family. I'm not the golden kid or the favorite, I'm simply there, quietly doing the right thing and keeping my head down. I was the kid who got all B's and never asked for anything. The one who did not ruin anything, yell at the dinner table, wreck the car, or sneak off to parties. I assumed that would be sufficient. It was not. My elder brother Liam is the golden one. He always was. He's 30, and he goes through life as if it owes him something. My parents, particularly my father, regard him as an unstoppable force. The one who will carry the family name forward, whatever that means. Liam played varsity football, even though he mostly sat on the sideline, and it garnered him years of adulation. Meanwhile, I was discreetly teaching myself how to make websites, edit movies, and even write some code. I got my first freelancing employment when I was 19. Nobody said anything. Mom used to call me the silent achiever, but things changed when Liam dropped out of college and chose to establish his own business. They hailed him courageous for it. Dad co-signed the loan. When I sought to start my own side hustle, a true LLC with a few respectable clients, Dad advised me to wait until I had more experience. I moved away as soon as I could afford to. I wasn't rushing away. Not really. I simply needed space. I continued to return for birthdays, holidays, and other occasions. Even when it felt awkward, Liam found new ways to tease me, calling me the intern, laughing at my attire, and asking if I was still making money on YouTube. It wasn't just him though. My parents never intervened. They always let things slip. This year, things started to grow worse. I'm not sure why precisely. Maybe the tension was mounting. Perhaps something snapped in Liam. Or maybe I simply quit brushing things off. It began with small things. When I arrived at the residence, I'd find my seat at the table already taken. Nobody would ask whether I wanted coffee or assistance with the dishes. If Liam needed assistance moving a couch or putting up his new computer, I was suddenly essential again. Then I'd return to being invisible. The tipping point began a few weeks ago. It was Dad's birthday. Big backyard party, steaks on the grill, and the typical booze and bravado routine. I showed up with a kind present, custom-engraved cufflinks with his initials and a phrase from his favorite book. I figured maybe this time it will work. Maybe he'd see I cared in my own way. However, when he opened it, all he said was, "Huh, that's different," before placing them on the table and going on. Meanwhile, Liam arrived 45 minutes late with a box of Cuban cigars and received a standing ovation. That was nothing new to me, but what came next hurt much more. I was assisting Mom in bringing out dessert when Liam began relating a tale about how I sobbed in gym class back in middle school. Complete falsehood. Everyone laughed, including my parents. Nobody glanced at me. I stood there holding a platter of lemon squares like an idiot, cheeks flushed and jaw clenched. When I eventually set them down, Dad just chuckled and remarked, "You were always sensitive, Ethan." After that night, I determined to put some space between us. I ignored a couple of texts. I skipped one of the Friday meals. I needed air, I needed perspective, but it simply made everything worse. Mom called 3 days ago to guilt trip me. She inquired if I had forgotten I was a member of the family. She stated Liam was worried about me, which was ridiculous. When I didn't bite, she asked if I could come over for supper Friday night. Only the four of us. It would be good to catch up, she remarked. Reset. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I figured they might have missed me. Maybe things would be different. It was not. Dinner was awkward from the beginning. The meal was fine. Mom always prepared a good roast, but no one was talking. Liam was on his phone half the time, and Dad simply continued drinking his beer, looking between us like he was waiting for a performance to begin. I tried to keep things light, asking about Mom's garden and discussing a project I was working on. Blank gaze and groans. Liam responded, "Sounds like a lot of time to waste on something no one's ever going to see." I gently reminded him that I had a few clients who enjoyed my work, that I'd developed a fairly consistent income, and that I was even considering getting a larger space next year. That's when Dad smiled and asked, "So are you finally going to get a real job?" Something shattered in me. Then a faint crack, nothing too loud or spectacular. I set down my fork, moved my plate forward and asked, "Why do you even invite me if everything I do is just a joke to you?" Liam leaned in, his voice rising. "Because you need to hear the truth for once. You're the reason this family's falling apart." His words resonated across the dining room. Mom looked down at her plate. Dad did not skip a beat. He nodded slowly and continued. He's right. We'd all be better off without you. I didn't disagree. I did not weep. I just rose up, grabbed my coat and went out. It was dark when I returned to my flat. I didn't get much sleep. I kept reliving their remarks, wondering how we got here and how I ever thought I was a member of that family. I ignored every phone call and text message that night. Then arrived this morning. I awoke to 15 missed calls, all from the hospital. And now I'm torn between picking up the phone and letting them experience what it's like to walk away. I looked at my phone for a long time. Just gazed. 15 missed calls, all from the hospital. No names. The same generic caller ID kept repeating itself, like an alert I had missed. I did not feel afraid at first. It's just confusion. Dull bewilderment. The type you get when your body awakens before your intellect. I crawled out of bed, legs weary. My mind still repeating the night before. Mason's voice echoed, and Dad's words felt like cold in my chest. Then followed the texts from Mom, one after another. Ethan, please call me. Something has happened. It's your dad. That one landed differently. I did not react. Not straight away. I simply sat on the side of my bed, the sunshine streaming in through the blinds as if nothing had happened. But everything did. Because the fact is that I did not feel panicked. I felt nothing. That's when I understood how far they had pushed me. I'd always thought that no matter how awful things went, some basic part of me would still care and need them. But when I stared at my phone, all I felt was frigid remoteness. As if I were seeing a stranger's situation develop on someone else's television. I eventually made a call. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to know. A nurse responded, polite, professional, and detached. She said that my father had been in with chest discomfort and a suspected heart attack, stable presently, but under watch. They were attempting to contact family members in case something changed. I thanked her and hung up, but no part of me wanted to rush over. Instead, I sat in solitude, allowing the weight of it all to settle and the irony to flourish. We'd all be better off without you, he stated. His heart stopped beating less than 14 hours later when he was sleeping. I don't say this with animosity, but more as an observation, as if the cosmos has been listening. An hour later, another call. This time it was Liam. I let it go to voicemail. His message was brief, clipped, and almost robotic. You should come. Dad is begging for you. That was new. Dad never asked for me. He never made it plain to me as an adult that he wanted me around. Not after I moved out. Not when I graduated. Not when I landed my first large customer and emailed him a film I was pleased with. But now when he's afraid and hooked up to a monitor, he recognizes my name. I did not go. Not that day. Instead, I cleaned my flat, washed the kitchen countertops, vacuumed under the sofa, and reorganized the wires behind my desk. I needed control over something. I needed to anchor myself in an environment where I wasn't invisible. By nightfall, Liam had made 4 more calls. Mom, twice. I did not respond to any of them. I turned off the phone and went for a stroll. Cold wind, deserted streets, my footfall reverberating through the silence. I reflected on how many years I'd spent bending myself to fit into a mold that they never made place for. How many holidays had I shown up out of guilt, only to leave feeling smaller than when I arrived. I recalled the platter of lemon squares I'd held as a peace offering, the laughing, the expression on Dad's face when he uttered it. We'd all do better without you. I'm not sure when it became typical for me to accept so little. The next morning I surrendered and went to the hospital. Not because I forgive him or miss them, but because I needed to see him. See, the man felt chopping me down would make him taller. I entered the clean white room expecting to feel anything. Rage, despair, and relief. But all I saw was a tired guy hooked up to machines, his eyes closed, and the lines around his lips tighter than I had recalled. Mom sat next to him, mascara streaked and hands gripped together as if a prayer had gone unanswered. Liam stood in the corner, arms folded and avoiding eye contact. When I entered, they both glanced up. Mom talked first. Thank you, Ethan, for coming. Liam didn't say anything, just nodded slightly. I did not sit down. I stood near the entrance, heart steady. After a lengthy silence, Dad opened his eyes, sluggish and unfocused. Then they landed on me. You came, Ethan, he croaked, his voice thin as smoke. I waited for something. An apology. A trace of regret. But all he said next was, I did not intend what I said. I wanted to believe it. I actually did. But after a lifetime of being second best, you begin to recognize hollow words before they touch the floor. I believe you did, I responded gently. You just didn't think it would echo back. He flinched slightly, but he didn't deny it. Mom stepped in. He wasn't thinking properly. Ethan, he was unhappy. Tired. You know how he gets when... I've known how he gets since I was 10 years old. And I interrupted him. No one talked after that. The heart monitor kept beeping steadily and slowly. I stayed 6 more minutes, maybe 7, before turning and leaving. That should have been the end of it, me walking out again, this time for good. But that night, something changed. It was late when I got home, nearly midnight, and I'd barely kicked off my shoes when I got a text from my cousin Olivia. We're not particularly close, but she's one of the few relatives who's always regarded me like a real human being, not just Liam's uncomfortable shadow. The text merely stated, "Hey, wanted to check on you. Heard what Liam did? That's screwed up." I blinked and reread it. What Liam did? I responded, "What do you mean?" 3 dots emerged and then disappeared. Then came the bomb. You didn't hear? He told people you refused to come to the hospital unless Dad promised to include you in the will. My stomach dropped, so I called her right away. She picked up quickly, her voice hushed but urgent. I was at Aunt Caroline's, and she said Liam was there, telling everyone you were blackmailing your way back into the family. He made it sound like he was threatening them, and he said you were only visiting Dad for money. I couldn't breathe, not because I was surprised Liam lied, but because everyone believed it so easily. I hadn't said anything about money, and I didn't want anything from them. But Liam knew exactly how to twist the knife. He knew I wasn't there to defend myself, and he knew how to turn my silence into a motive. Olivia kept talking, and he said, "You've always been jealous that you resented him for being successful." I laughed bitterly. Successful? He's living off loans Dad co-signed, whereas I have a business, clients, and my own bills. I know, she said. But you know how it is. They all eat up whatever Liam says. He's the good one. Always has been. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from fury. A slow, cold kind of fury. The kind that creeps into your spine and whispers, "Enough is enough." That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled out my old hard drive, the one I hadn't touched in months, and started organizing files, contracts, invoices, screenshots, video backups, every bit of proof I had that I built Eva. He didn't realize I'd been documenting things for years. Old texts, passive-aggressive emails, voice memos from phone calls I'd recorded when I suspected he'd twist my words. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared because people like Liam don't stop unless someone makes them. By sunrise I had everything in order, but the real twist came that afternoon. I received another call from the hospital, this time from the billing department. "Hello, is this Ethan Reynolds?" the voice inquired. "Yes. This is merely a courtesy call about the card you gave for your father's operation. We needed to check the allegations before proceeding." My thoughts blanked. "I didn't submit a card." The lady stopped. "It's listed under your name. The same address as the one we have on file for the emergency contact." I asked her to read it out. It was my old address, where I used to live before Liam moved in after I left. My jaw clenched. "Don't process anything," I whispered. "That card is not authorized." I hung up, and I knew he used my name, my identity, to pay for Dad's hospital bills, probably to look like a hero, and maybe even to make me look guilty if it came out later. I sat there, heart pounding, as the pieces fell into place. The lie about the will, the smear campaign, the fraudulent charge. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was war, and Liam had just made the biggest mistake of his life. I don't remember the exact moment I hit rock bottom. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. No shouting, no tears, but rather a slow, silent sinking, like waking up underwater, realizing you'd been drowning for a while, and wondering if swimming was even worth it anymore. After that call from the hospital billing department, I didn't yell or punch a wall. Instead, I sat in my chair, staring at nothing as the weight of it all settled in. Liam had used my name, my identity to cover a hospital bill, and he'd done so casually, as if it were just another tool in his arsenal. The betrayal hit me differently this time. It wasn't just words or cold shoulders over dinner. It was calculated, personal, a theft of both money and narrative, and it hurt. He'd twist the story later, Perhaps to say I offered to pay, or that I tried to buy my way back into the family. Not because I needed their approval anymore, but because it confirmed something I tried so hard not to believe. They didn't just fail to see me. They chose not to. When I called the hospital back and told them the charge was unauthorized, they were polite but unhelpful, saying I'd have to file a fraud claim with my bank and that they couldn't remove the card unless someone else took financial responsibility. I asked who added my card in the first place, and they said it had been provided during intake, and the form was signed by an Ethan Reynolds. I asked for a copy and they said they'd send it by mail. I could already see it in my head. Liam's handwriting or a sloppy attempt at copying mine. But seeing it wasn't what scared me. What scared me was how normal it all felt. As if I was used to being violated by my own family. That night, I walked. Just walked. With no destination in mind. My legs moving block after block as if trying to outrun the thoughts in my head. The sky was overcast. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, but I felt hollow. Absolutely gutted. The next few days passed in a fog. I didn't work, I didn't sleep, and I ignored texts and phone calls. Liam had messaged me once with a smug line like, "Just cleaning up your mess, little bro. You're welcome." I couldn't respond. I didn't trust myself to say something I wouldn't regret. Mom texted as well, saying they were worried about me, that Dad was home now recovering and that we should put things behind us and come together. I almost laughed when I read that, as if we were a sitcom family arguing over Thanksgiving turkey, not a broken house held together by manipulation and selective memory. Then came the mail. The hospital's intake form. The signature wasn't even near to mine. It was hilarious, with big looping letters attempting to resemble my writing but full of irregularities, sloppy, hasty, and apparent. Liam didn't even bother to conceal it, he expected me to roll over as he usually did. I opened a new folder on my desktop labeled Truth and began building every email, voicemail, screenshot of Liam's texts, receipt showing my real address, actual bank information, and business activity. I pulled copies of my LLC filings from years ago, proof that I wasn't freeloading, jealous, or still figuring things out. For the first time in my life, I stopped editing myself for them, stopped shrinking to fit into the version of myself that made them comfortable, and began writing my story, not a Reddit post or a letter. I found old photos from family dinners where Liam would crop me out before posting them online, from parties where I was always behind the camera, never in front of it. I wrote down everything, the comments, the lies, the quiet betrayals, the gaslighting. I didn't intend to share it. I just needed to see it to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I had lived through it and survived. Somewhere in the middle of that process, I began to remember who I was before all of this. Before Liam's voice became the one that rewrote every room we entered. Before Dad's silence swallowed every opportunity to speak up, I remembered being proud of myself when I landed my first client. When I finished a 3-month video project that helped a small business triple their traffic, I remembered waking up excited to work rather than drained from carrying invisible wounds. I contacted an old client whom I had assisted in rebranding their company last year. We hadn't spoken in months, so I asked if they needed any video work done. They said yes, and within a day I was back in the zone, editing clips, selecting music and syncing transitions. My mind felt clear for the first time in weeks. I worked late into the night, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. One gig turned into 2, then a referral, then another. I didn't advertise or post anything online, but something had changed. The more I focused on myself, on building rather than reacting, the more momentum I gathered. And the more I worked, the more I realized how much my family had shrunk me. I started going to the gym again. Nothing fancy, just a few light sessions a week to get my body moving. I used to second-guess myself, worried that I was being overly sensitive or making things about me, but the truth was that they made it about me when it was convenient, when they needed someone to blame, or when they needed someone to pay the bill. I changed my diet, started sleeping better, cleared out my apartment, donated old clothes, rearranged furniture, and threw out junk I didn't even remember owning. It felt symbolic, like shedding skin. I even booked a weekend trip to a small cabin upstate with no Wi-Fi or noise. I brought books, not screens. I hiked, journaled, sat in silence and listened to the wind, and somewhere out there, surrounded by trees and sky, I realized something important. I don't need them. I don't need their validation, permission, or even their love, at least not the kind they're capable of giving. What I needed was myself, my voice, my story, my strength. When I returned from that trip, I realized that Liam wasn't just a bully. He was a coward in a loud costume, a fragile ego dressed in bravado. Dad wasn't a patriarch. He was a man who picked favorites and called it discipline. Mom wasn't innocent. Her silence was a choice, and her refusal to stand up for me had consequences, whether she admitted it or not. But I wasn't going to chase an apology anymore. Instead, I was going to show them who they were attempting to erase. I started small, updating my portfolio, rebranding my website, polishing my client testimonials, adding new services, and then launching a YouTube channel, not for fame, but as a creative outlet, with tutorials, breakdowns of editing techniques, and behind-the-scenes project commentary. Within a week, a few videos began to gain traction. Comments began to trickle in, then more. One video reached 12,000 views, then 60,000 views. Emails followed. New clients, collaborations. I was creating something real, something mine. But here's the thing. I didn't tell anyone, not even Olivia. I wanted this to grow in silence, free of their reach, untouched by their narratives. But the universe has a funny way of delivering news. One night, about a month after that hospital incident, I received another message from Liam, short, smug. Heard you're doing YouTube now. Cute. No congratulations. No curiosity, just condescension. But here's what he didn't know. I'd trademarked my brand and secured contracts. I'd filed paperwork. I'd grown stronger in the silence. And he still thought I was the same person who would shrink when challenged. He didn't realize I was no longer playing defense. I was building an offense. And if he tried to interfere, I'd be ready, because rebuilding is quiet. It's quiet, intentional, relentless, and eventually unstoppable. I didn't set out to get revenge. For weeks after I started rebuilding my business and re-entering myself, all I wanted was peace and silence. A life where my name wasn't dragged into lies. Where my accomplishments weren't used as punchlines. And where I could wake up every day knowing no one could take credit for what I'd built. But sometimes, especially when you've been used and discarded for years, peace can only come after justice, and justice doesn't show up by accident. It began with the credit fraud, which Liam used my name and old address to slap on Dad's hospital bills. I'd already filed a report with my bank and was working with them to investigate the charge, but I needed more. That's when I remembered something. A year ago, before Liam moved in, I installed a small security camera above the door. It wasn't a high-end system, just a basic motion-activated camera that uploaded footage to a cloud account I hadn't accessed in months. I'd installed it after someone stole a package, but when I moved out I forgot to take it down. It wasn't connected to Wi-Fi anymore, but I remembered that it had an SD card, and I knew Liam didn't notice things that weren't about him, so the camera was probably still there, dead and dusty but still storing data. The next morning I drove by the old place, parked across the street and just watched for a while. Liam's truck was there, with the same vanity plate. M4 Son, as subtle as ever, and there was no sign he was home. I waited until he left, probably to the gym or to brag somewhere, and then I made my move. The camera was still there, hidden in the porch light housing, exactly where I'd left it. I popped it open, yanked the SD card, and dashed away. When I got home, I dug out an old adapter and plugged the card into my laptop. The majority of the footage was old, with me grabbing takeout, the landlord fixing a leak, and a raccoon doing unspeakable things to a trash can. But then I came across the one. It was 4 weeks ago, and the timestamp was 2 hours after Dad was admitted to the hospital. I saved the video, backed it up 5 times, and uploaded it to my Truth folder. It didn't show Liam signing the form, but it did place him at the address associated with the fraudulent hospital charge, and most importantly, it proved I wasn't there. After completing step 1, I contacted Olivia. I hadn't told her much since the last time she messaged me about Liam's smear campaign, but I figured if anyone in the family would be open to hearing the truth, it would be her. I sent her the video and asked, "Do you think anyone in the family would believe this matters?" She immediately phoned me. "Oh my goodness, Ethan," she replied. This confirms he's lying." I described everything: the charge, the signature, the voicemail, Liam's text, and the video evidence. Her voice was low and weak. "I knew he was evil," she murmured. "But this is next level. This is criminal." The word hung in the air. Criminal. It was no longer simply family turmoil. It was legal. Olivia didn't hesitate. "You need to do something with this. Expose him. Go public. Inform the family. Call the police. Whatever it takes." I wasn't ready to go full nuclear yet, not until I had everything in order. But I assured her I had a plan, which I did, since Liam's most powerful weapon was story. Before I could burn his bridge, I had to rebuild mine. I began by writing a letter. Not a rant, not a revenge post, but a letter to every extended family member who had been fed Liam's lies. I told Aunt Caroline, Uncle Thomas, Cousin Olivia, and even Grandma Helen, everything calmly, clearly, and factually, including screenshots, timelines, camera footage, proof of the forged signature, and the fraudulent hospital charge. I explained how Liam used my name and framed it as if I demanded inheritance money. And I didn't beg for sympathy. I just laid out the facts, and then I asked one simple question. If someone can lie so easily about their own brother, what else have they lied about? Olivia assisted me in sending it, some via email, others printed and mailed, and then we waited. For a few days nothing happened. Radio silence. I figured most of them had either ignored it or sided with Liam as they always did. But then Grandma Helen called, which might not seem like a big deal, but in our family, it was. Grandma Helen was the matriarch, the spine, the only person Dad still listened to. She'd never been warm toward me, more polite than loving, but she was sharp, observant, and had always believed Liam's stories until now. Her voice on the phone was low and forceful. I read your letter, Ethan. I didn't know what to say. I believe you, she said, which nearly shocked me. I don't know what happened to your brother, she continued. It's spiteful, and I will not accept it. She didn't say anything further, but it was sufficient. Aunt Caroline messaged me, saying she'd always suspected Liam had twisted tendencies and that my letter just confirmed it. Uncle Thomas texted, asking for copies of the hospital documents. And Olivia, who used to call me boring Ethan, sent a DM that said, "Wow, I had no idea. I'm sorry for laughing at such jokes. I didn't know it was like this." I didn't need their sympathy, but I did need their eyes. And now that they were open, I took the next step. I set up a private Zoom call, not for drama or argument, but to let the truth be seen. I invited everyone who had responded positively, and I walked them through the evidence calmly and professionally, like a client pitch. I showed the video, the text messages, the hospital invoice, and even the voicemail Liam left me, where he said, "Just cleaning up your mess, little bro." When the call ended, there was silence, and then Grandma Helen said, "This family deserves better." I didn't say it out loud, but I thought I do too. Olivia contacted me after the call. "You're scaring him," she said. I stared. "What, Liam?" she continued. "He's messaging people, freaking out, claiming you're trying to ruin his life, that you're obsessed with him." I nearly laughed. Of course he was playing the victim, but I wasn't finished because Liam hadn't just lied. He tried to call me once and I let it ring. I had already spoken with a detective, shared the documents, footage, and timeline, and they were looking into it. I didn't know how far it would go, but I knew it wasn't going away, and that scared Liam more than anything. Then another message appeared. "Please don't do this." I stared at it for a long time, the irony not lost on me. Please don't do this. As if I hadn't spent my entire life begging them to stop. But the real turning point came a week later when Dad called. Not Mom, not Olivia. Dad. I didn't answer, and he left a voicemail. "Ethan, I'm not sure what's going on between you and Liam. Your mother claims it's gotten out of hand. I'd love a chance to discuss face to face." I didn't call back. Instead I turned there, not out of compliance but out of strength, because I wanted him to see me. Not the picture Liam painted. Not the quiet achiever. Not the scapegoat. Me. And as I pulled up to that house, his house, I knew this wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of the reckoning, and I had all the pieces in place. When I pulled into my parents' driveway that afternoon, I didn't feel nervous, which surprised me because this house had always made my stomach knot before I even stepped out of the car. Today, there was no fear, no anger, just a steady calm, as if I'd already crossed some invisible line and there was no going back. Dad opened the door himself and he looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, older. The hospital scare had taken something out of him that pride couldn't fully mask. For a brief moment, I almost felt bad. Then I remembered his voice at the dinner table, how he'd said we'd all be better off without me, and the feeling passed. "Ethan," he said, clearing his throat. "Come in." Liam was already there, pacing the living room like a caged animal. He stopped when he saw me. His face hardened, then shifted into something defensive, almost desperate. "So this is it," he snapped. "Are you gonna flaunt your little slideshow for Dad too?" I didn't answer. I dropped my laptop bag down on the dining table and sat quietly, methodically. The way people do when they know they have an advantage. Mom remained near the kitchen, eyes darting between us, hands wringing the edge of her sweater. She appeared exhausted and guilty, as if she had waited too long to choose a side and realized too late that neutrality was a decision in and of itself. Dad motioned for Liam to sit, and he didn't say anything. "Explain why the family is being dragged into this," Dad said to me. I nodded, opened my laptop and turned it so everyone could see. "But first, I want to be clear. I did not bring the family into anything. Liam did." "I'm just finished covering for that," Liam scoffed. "Unbelievable. You've always been theatrical." I pushed play, and the surveillance tape filled the screen, showing Liam in a hoodie walking out of the old home with the clipboard, the timestamp and address obvious. Dad leaned closer. Mom covered her lips. "What is this?" Dad asked slowly. "This," I said. "Is Liam leaving the address associated with the hospital intake form? The same address used when my name and card were fraudulently attached to your medical bills." Liam laughed, sharp and forced. "That doesn't prove anything." I clicked to the next file, the intake form, the signature enlarged side by side with my genuine one. "Forgery," I continued. "Ask any handwriting analyzer." Liam's chuckle faded. I then played the voicemail. "Just cleaning up your mess, little bro." "You're welcome." Silence filled the room and Mom sat down hard on a chair. Dad's face turned pale, then hot, and then pale again. Liam opened his mouth, then closed it. "I didn't," he began. I raised my hand. "I'm not done." I showed them the text messages in which Liam told people I'd demanded money. The screenshots Olivia had forwarded of family group chats in which my name was dragged through the dirt while I remained silent. The bank correspondence, the fraud report, and the detective's email confirming the investigation. When I finally closed the laptop, the house felt different, heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Dad stared at Liam, not with pride or indulgence, but with amazement. "You used your brother's identity," he said quietly. "You committed fraud," Liam shouted. "I was assisting, you were at the hospital. Someone needed to take care of it. Ethan never does anything for this family." That was it, his final card. And I stood up. "I've spent my whole life doing things for this family," I said, my voice steady. "I simply didn't do them loudly enough for you. I didn't lie, steal, or step on others to be important, and you despise me for it." I looked to Dad. "You taught him that," I said. "Every time you laughed at his jokes about me. You didn't merely select a favorite when you dubbed my work a pastime or remained silent while he tormented me. You built a monster and called it leadership." Dad was unable to answer, and Mom began silently weeping. "I didn't know," she muttered. I glanced at her. "You knew enough." Liam took a step toward me. "Do you believe you've won?" he hissed. "You think this would make you better?" I met his eyes. "No. It makes me free." 3 days later, the police arrived at the house, not for me, but for Liam. Fraud charges, identity theft, and document falsification. The detective was polite but firm. Liam tried to argue, spin, and blame me, but it didn't work. Evidence doesn't care about charm. The family fallout was immediate and brutal. Aunt Caroline stopped answering Liam's calls, and Uncle Thomas demanded repayment for money Liam borrowed years ago under false pretenses. Grandma Helen rewrote her will, but not dramatically. She simply removed Liam as executive and reassigned responsibilities to a neutral third party. Dad didn't speak to Liam for weeks, and when he did, he offered disappointment rather than forgiveness, which hurt Liam more than any punishment could. As for me, I walked away with closure, not anger or silence. I refused to be the glue that held together a structure built on lies, so I kept my distance and focused on my work. My channel grew, my business doubled, and I moved into a new place that was bigger, brighter, and entirely mine. Months later, Dad called to apologize. I accepted it without reopening the door. Mom sends occasional messages. They're careful now, measured, respectful. Liam, last I heard, is still telling people his brother ruined his life. Perhaps he believes that. But here's the truth. I didn't ruin anything. I simply stopped allowing myself to be the family's scapegoat. And when I ultimately walked away, I didn't retaliate with yelling or harshness, but with the truth, which strangely enough, doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard.